Jake Martinez rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the computer screen again. The numbers still made no sense. For 3 hours, strange signals had been coming through the deep space receivers at Kepler 7 station. The patterns were unlike anything he had ever seen before. "Ryan, come look at this," Jake called to his friend across the control room. Ryan Clark was the best communications officer on the station. If anyone could figure out what these signals meant, it would be him. Ryan walked over and stared at the screen. His face went pale. "Jake, this is not random noise. This is a message. A real message from somewhere out there." The two men looked at each other. In all their years working at the research station that orbited Neptune, they had never seen anything like this. The signals were coming from deep space far beyond any human ship or satellite. "We need to get Lisa," Jake said. Dr. Lisa Thompson was the station's expert on languages and communication. She had studied every form of human communication and had theories about how aliens might try to talk to humans. They found Lisa in her lab, working on her latest research project. When they showed her the signals, her hands started shaking. "This is incredible," she whispered. "These patterns are too complex to be natural. Someone is trying to communicate with us." For the next 6 hours, the three worked together to decode the message. The signals came in bursts with the same patterns repeating over and over. Slowly, they began to see pictures forming in the data. The first image was simple. It showed a circle with smaller circles around it. Then came more images. Ships, planets, beings that looked like they might be alive. "It's like a story told in pictures," Lisa explained. "Look at this sequence. These smaller ships are being destroyed by much larger ones. And here, these round shapes that might be planets are being attacked." As they worked deeper into the message, the story became clearer and more frightening. The aliens were showing them a war. A terrible war where peaceful beings were being destroyed by a powerful enemy. The most shocking part came near the end of the message. The aliens had included a star map. It showed where they were located and where Earth was located. They knew about humans. They knew where to find Earth. "They're asking for help," Ryan said quietly. "They're 40 light years away, and they're asking us to help them fight a war." Jake felt his heart pounding. This changed everything. Humans were not alone in the universe. There were other intelligent beings out there, and they were in trouble. "We need to contact Admiral Stone immediately," Jake said. Admiral Patricia Stone was in charge of all human space defense. She would know what to do. The call to Earth took several hours because of the distance. When Admiral Stone finally appeared, on their screen she looked tired and stressed. Running Earth's defenses was not an easy job. "Admiral, we have a situation that requires your immediate attention," Jake began. He tried to keep his voice calm, but it was difficult. "What kind of situation, Lieutenant Commander Martinez?" the Admiral asked. "We have received a message from an alien civilization. They are asking for our help in a war." The Admiral's face went completely still. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she leaned forward in her chair. "Show me everything," she ordered. Jake, Ryan, and Lisa spent the next 2 hours explaining their discovery. They showed the Admiral all the images they had decoded. They explained the star map and the location of the alien civilization. The aliens called themselves the Veltar Collective. From what the humans could understand, they were a group of 12 different species who had lived in peace for thousands of years. They were scientists, artists, and philosophers. They had never needed to build weapons or fight wars, but now they faced an enemy called the Korthak Dominion. The Korthak were destroyers. They conquered planet after planet, enslaving or killing everyone they found. The Veltar had no way to fight back. "Why are they asking us for help?" Admiral Stone wanted to know. "How do they even know we exist?" Lisa answered. "According to their message, they have been listening to our radio signals for many years. They know we come from what they call a death world. They think this means we know how to fight." "A death world?" the Admiral asked. "They seem to believe that most planets where life exists are very safe and peaceful places. Earth, with all its dangers and conflicts, is unusual. They think beings from dangerous worlds like Earth would be good at warfare." Admiral Stone was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. This message could change everything for humanity. We need to bring this to the Global Defense Council immediately. Within hours, the most important leaders on Earth were gathered in an emergency meeting. The President of the United Earth Government, the head of the Space Defense Force, and representatives from every major nation on Earth listened as Admiral Stone explained the situation. The room was silent when she finished. The President was the first to speak. "Are we certain this message is real? Could this be some kind of trick or mistake?" Lisa answered. "The mathematical and linguistic complexity of this message is beyond anything humans could create as a fake. The star charts match our own astronomical data perfectly. This is real." "What do we know about these Korthak enemies?" asked General William Hayes, head of Earth's ground forces. "Not much," Admiral Stone admitted. "The Veltar message shows they have large ships and powerful weapons. They seem to be a warrior culture that conquers other civilizations. Beyond that, we would need more information." The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some leaders wanted to ignore the message completely. Earth had its own problems and didn't need to get involved in alien wars. Others argued that if the Korthak were truly as dangerous as the message suggested, they might eventually threaten Earth as well. Dr. Robert Kim, Earth's top scientist, raised an important point. If these Veltar have technology advanced enough to send messages across 40 light years, they might have other technologies that could benefit humanity. This could be the greatest opportunity in human history. "Or the greatest trap," replied Senator Carol White. "We know nothing about these aliens except what they've told us. How do we know they're telling the truth?" The President listened to all the arguments. Finally, he made his decision. "We will send a response to the Veltar message. We will tell them that humans are interested in learning more about their situation, but we will not commit to anything until we know more about what we're dealing with." Admiral Stone nodded. "I recommend we prepare a small exploration fleet. If we're going to communicate with these aliens, we should be ready to send ships to meet them." "Agreed," the President said. "But this information stays classified at the highest level. The public is not ready to learn about alien contact. Not yet." Over the next few days, Jake Martinez found himself at the center of the most important discovery in human history. He worked with teams of scientists and military experts to prepare humanity's response to the Veltar message. The response was simple but important. Humans were willing to learn more about the Veltar and their situation. They were interested in meeting and possibly helping, but they needed more information first. As Jake watched the message being transmitted toward the distant alien civilization, he wondered what he had started. Humanity was about to take its first steps into a larger universe, and nothing would ever be the same. The response would take years to reach the Veltar. Their reply would take just as long to come back. But Jake knew that this was just the beginning. Humanity was no longer alone, and soon they would have to decide what that meant for their future among the stars. Captain Alex Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance, watching the stars change in ways no human had ever seen before. The ship's new faster-than-light drive was working perfectly, bending space around them as they traveled toward the Veltar homeworld, 40 light-years away. 3 weeks to reach another star system, said Commander Tony Garcia, his second in command. 6 months ago, that would have been impossible. Alex nodded. The Veltar had sent them the plans for faster-than-light travel along with their plea for help. It was a gesture of trust that showed how desperate they truly were. No civilization would share such important technology unless they had no other choice. Dr. Helen Carter was studying the Veltar data files in her laboratory deep inside the ship. She was humanity's best expert on alien biology and culture. For 3 weeks, she had been trying to understand everything about their new allies. "Captain Rodriguez, to the lab, please." Helen's voice came over the ship's communication system. Alex found Helen surrounded by holographic displays showing alien cities, beings, and technology. Her excitement was obvious. "Alex, you need to see this," she said. "The Veltar aren't just one species. They're 12 different species that formed an alliance thousands of years ago. Look at this." The hologram showed beings that looked like tall, thin humans with blue skin. Others looked like large cats that walked on 2 legs. Some looked like birds with hands instead of wings. Each species was completely different, but they all lived together in peace. "How is this possible?" Alex asked. 12 different species, working together without any conflict. That's what makes them so special, Helen explained. They've built a civilization based on cooperation and learning. Each species contributes what they do best. The Zephyrians are great artists. The Thalmor are amazing engineers. The Veltar themselves are natural diplomats. Alex studied the images. The alien cities were beautiful beyond anything humans had ever built. Buildings that seemed to grow from the ground like plants. Vehicles that floated through the air without making any noise. Parks and gardens everywhere with different species walking together and talking. "What about their military?" Alex asked. "What kind of weapons do they have?" Helen's expression changed. "That's the problem. They don't really have a military. They have some defense systems, but nothing that could stop a serious attack. They've never needed to fight anyone before." This was troubling news. Alex had hoped the Veltar would be strong allies in the coming war. Instead, it seemed like humans would be protecting beings who had never learned to protect themselves. The Defiance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Veltar home system. What Alex saw through the view screen took his breath away. The system had 7 planets, and 3 of them were covered with cities. Space stations orbited every world, connected by streams of ships moving between them. "We're being contacted," said Lieutenant Amy Brooks from the communication station. "The signal is coming from the 3rd planet." "Put it on screen," Alex ordered. The view screen showed a being that looked somewhat like a human, but taller and thinner, with skin that seemed to shimmer with different colors. When it spoke, the translation system converted its words into English. "Welcome, friends from Earth. I am High Counselor Zethara of the Veltar Collective. We have waited so long for your arrival." Alex stepped forward. "I am Captain Alex Rodriguez of the United Earthship Defiance. We have come to learn more about your situation and see how we might help. Please, come to Sanctuary Prime. We have prepared quarters for you and your crew. There is much to discuss." The Defiance entered orbit around the beautiful world of Sanctuary Prime. Alex had never seen a planet so perfect. The continents were covered with green forests and blue oceans. Cities sparkled like jewels, but they didn't scar the landscape, the way human cities did. Everything seemed to blend together naturally. Alex took a small shuttle down to the surface with Dr. Carter and 5 other crew members. The landing pad was made of some kind of crystal that glowed softly in the sunlight. Veltar beings of different species waited to greet them. High Counselor Zethara was even more impressive in person. She moved with a grace that reminded Alex of a dancer. Her large eyes seemed to hold great intelligence and kindness. "Captain Rodriguez, Dr. Carter, welcome to our world," she said. "I know this must be strange for you. We are the first alien beings you have ever met." "It's an honor," Alex replied. "Your world is beautiful. Come, let me show you our civilization. Perhaps then you will understand why we need your help so desperately." The tour that followed amazed the humans. The Veltar had solved problems that Earth was still struggling with. Their cities produced no pollution. Their factories created everything they needed without harming the environment. Disease and hunger had been eliminated centuries ago. "How long do your people live?" Dr. Carter asked as they walked through a hospital that looked more like a garden. "Most of us live for 300 to 400 of your years," Zethara answered. "The Eternal Ones, our oldest species, can live for over 1,000 years. We have time to learn, to grow, to become wise." They visited schools where young beings of different species learned together. They saw laboratories where scientists worked on projects that could benefit the entire galaxy. They toured art galleries filled with beautiful works that combined the talents of all 12 species, but when they asked to see military installations, Zethara looked uncomfortable. "We do have some defenses," she admitted, "but I fear you will find them inadequate." The defense center was impressive in its own way. Massive computers tracked every ship in the system. Energy shields could protect the most important cities. There were even some weapons platforms in orbit around each planet. But as Dr. Carter and the ship's weapons expert, Lieutenant Dan Phillips, examined the systems, they realized the truth. The Veltar weapons were designed to disable, not destroy. Their shields could stop small attacks, but not a full military assault. Everything was built by beings who had never really fought a war. These are wonderful for keeping peace, Dan said quietly to Alex. But against a real enemy, they won't last an hour. That evening, the humans met with the Veltar Leadership Council. Representatives from all 12 species were present. The meeting took place in a great hall with a dome that showed the stars above. Zathara began the discussion.
Captain Rodriguez, we must tell you about the concept of Deathworlds. This will help you understand why we contacted your species. She activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy. Thousands of dots represented inhabited worlds. Most
planets where intelligent life develops are what we call garden worlds, she explained. They have stable climates, abundant resources, and few dangers. Life evolves peacefully on these worlds. The display changed, showing peaceful planets with gentle landscapes and calm weather. But some worlds are different. Some worlds are dangerous. They have violent weather, dangerous animals, natural disasters, and other threats. We call these death worlds. Very few species survive on death worlds, but those that do become very strong. Alex began to understand. You're saying Earth is a death world? Yes, said Mordan, a representative of the cat-like Thalmor species. Your planet has ice ages, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes, earthquakes, and thousands of predatory species. The fact that humans not only survived but became the dominant species tells us much about your capabilities. Species from death worlds are rare, added Kayeth, one of the bird-like Zephyrians. In our recorded history, we know of only 3 other death world species. All of them became great warriors when necessary. Dr. Carter leaned forward. Are you saying most intelligent species in the galaxy are peaceful like you? Yes, Zathara confirmed. This is why the Korthak Dominion has been so successful. Most civilizations have no experience with real warfare. We build defenses, but we don't truly understand violence the way Deathworld species do. Alex felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Tell us about the Korthak. What exactly are we facing? The mood in the room became dark. Zathara's skin lost its shimmer and became dull gray. The Korthak Dominion is led by beings from a world that may also be a death world, but they chose a different path than humans. Instead of using their strength to protect and build, they use it to conquer and destroy. The holographic display showed images that made the humans sick. Burned cities, destroyed ships, beings in chains being forced to work as slaves. They have conquered 18 star systems in the past 50 years, Mordan explained. Over 40 billion beings have died or been enslaved. They show no mercy and take no prisoners except as slaves. Their leader is called War Supreme Gorthak, Kieth added. He has united dozens of warrior clans under his rule. They believe that conquest is their sacred duty, and that weak species deserve to be enslaved. Alex studied the images of Korthak ships. They were huge and heavily armed, but they looked crude compared to Veltar technology. What do you need from us? He asked. We need teachers, Zathara said. We need someone to show us how to fight, how to defend ourselves. We have the technology to build weapons, but we don't understand warfare itself. More than that, Mordan added, we need allies who can stand with us when the Korthak come. Danny Walsh had never felt fear like this before. He floated in the darkness of space, watching the Korthak fleet destroy everything in the Meranti system. His stealth ship was invisible to their sensors, but that didn't make him feel any safer. The UES Shadow had been equipped with the best Veltar stealth technology available. For 2 weeks, Danny and his small reconnaissance team had been following Korthak forces, learning everything they could about humanity's new enemy. What they had learned was terrifying. Captain, you need to see this, whispered Sergeant Kate Miller from her position at the sensor station. Even though no one could hear them in space, everyone on the Shadow spoke quietly when watching the Korthak work. Danny floated over to look at Kate's screen. The display showed the 3rd planet of the Meranti system. 6 hours ago, it had been home to 2 billion beings from a peaceful species called the Meranti. Now it was a ball of fire and smoke. They're not even taking prisoners this time, Kate said, her voice shaking. They're just killing everyone. Through the view screen, Danny could see the massive Korthak ships firing beam weapons at the burning planet below. Each blast created explosions that could be seen from space. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were being turned to ash in minutes. How many ships do they have? Asked Corporal Luis Santos, the team's weapons expert. Danny counted the dark shapes moving through space around the dying planet. I see 47 heavy cruisers, maybe 200 smaller ships, and that thing in the center has to be their command ship. The Korthak command ship was enormous. It was easily 3 times larger than the biggest human battleship. Weapons covered every surface. It looked like it had been built for one purpose: to destroy everything in its path. But as Danny studied the enemy ships more carefully, he began to notice things that gave him hope. Kate, are you recording all of this? He asked. Every detail. Captain, the military analysts back home are going to want to see everything. For 6 more hours, they watched the Korthak fleet complete its destruction of the Meranti system. When they were finished, nothing was left alive. The planets were burned rocks, the space stations were twisted metal floating in the dark. But Danny had seen enough. The Korthak were brutal and efficient, but they were not invincible. Set course. For the rendezvous point, he ordered. We need to get this information back to Admiral Stone as quickly as possible. The journey back to human space took 3 weeks. During that time, Danny and his team analyzed everything they had recorded. By the time they reached Earth, they had a complete picture of what humanity was facing. Admiral Stone met them personally at the Mars orbital station. Her face was tense as she led them to a secure briefing room. Show me what you found, she said simply. For the next 4 hours, Danny presented his findings. The holographic displays showed Korthak ships, weapons, and battle tactics. They showed the complete destruction of 3 different star systems. The Korthak have approximately 800 ships in their main fleet, Danny reported. They have thousands more scattered across their conquered territories, but those are mostly garrison forces. The main fleet is what we need to worry about. Admiral Stone studied the images of Korthak warriors. They were large, powerful beings covered in thick armor. Their faces were hidden behind metal masks, but their movements showed strength and aggression. What about their technology? The Admiral asked. That's the interesting part, Danny replied. Their ships are big and heavily armed, but the technology is actually pretty basic. Their weapons are powerful but crude. Their armor is thick but slow. Their computers are simple but reliable. Colonel Steve Harrison, Earth's top military strategist, leaned forward. Are you saying they're not as advanced as we expected? In some ways, yes, Danny confirmed. They've built everything for raw power, not efficiency. A single Korthak ship could probably destroy 3 or 4 Veltar ships, but I think our ships could hold their own in a fair fight. But it won't be a fair fight, Admiral Stone pointed out. They outnumber us significantly. Danny nodded. That's true. But I noticed something else. They don't use complex tactics. They just charge straight at their enemies and try to overwhelm them with firepower. They've never had to fight anyone who could fight back effectively. He activated another holographic display. This one showed the battle formations the Korthak used when attacking planets. Look at this. They spread their ships out in a simple line and advance slowly. No flanking maneuvers, no complex coordination. They rely on their enemies being too scared or too weak to resist. Colonel Harrison smiled for the first time during the briefing. So they're bullies. They're used to beating up opponents who can't fight back. Exactly, Danny said. And there's something else. I was able to intercept some of their communications. Dr. Carol Bennett has been analyzing them. Dr. Bennett was Earth's leading expert on military psychology. She had spent her career studying how different cultures approached warfare. She stepped forward to address the group. The Korthak have a very specific mindset, she began. They believe that strength is the only thing that matters. They respect power and despise weakness. This makes them effective against peaceful civilizations, but it also creates blind spots. What kind of blind spots? Admiral Stone asked. They don't understand strategy beyond hit it harder, Carol explained. They don't value intelligence gathering, tactical flexibility, or adaptation during battle. Once they commit to an attack plan, They don't change it. They also have a rigid command structure, Danny added. Everything flows from their leader, War Supreme Gorthok. If something happens to him, their entire command system could collapse. Admiral Stone was quiet for a long time, studying all the information. Finally, she spoke. What you're telling me is that the Gorthok are dangerous because of their size and brutality, but they're vulnerable because of their inflexibility. That's right, Danny confirmed. They're like a very big, very angry animal, dangerous but predictable. There's one more thing, Carol added. From what I can tell from their communications, they've never encountered organized resistance before. Every species they've conquered has either surrendered immediately or been destroyed quickly. They have no experience with extended campaigns against determined opponents. This was the best news Admiral Stone had heard in weeks. So if we can put up a real fight, they might not know how to respond. It's possible, Carol said, but we can't underestimate them. They're still incredibly dangerous, and they have the numbers to overwhelm us if we're not careful. Over the next several days, military planners from across the Earth Defense Forces studied Danny's intelligence reports. Gradually, a picture emerged of how humanity might be able to fight the Gorthok successfully. Captain Brian Roberts, one of Earth's most experienced ship commanders, was brought in to analyze Gorthok ship designs. Their vessels are built like flying fortresses, he reported. Heavy armor, massive weapons, but slow and clumsy. Our ships are faster and more maneuverable. In a dogfight, we would have the advantage. What about their numbers? Asked General Maria Santos, head of Earth's Space Marines. That's the real challenge, Brian admitted. Even if our ships are better one-on-one, they have enough ships to overwhelm us through sheer volume, unless we don't fight them one-on-one, Colonel Harrison suggested. What if we use hit-and-run tactics, strike fast, do damage, and retreat before they can respond? Admiral Stone nodded slowly. Like guerrilla warfare in space. Exactly. The Gorthok are used to frontal assaults against stationary targets. If we can force them to chase us around while we pick off their ships one by one, we might be able to even the odds. The planning continued for weeks. Human military doctrine was adapted for space warfare against a numerically superior enemy. Training programs were developed to prepare pilots and Marines for combat against Gorthok forces. But the most important discovery came from Dr. Bennett's continued analysis of Gorthok communications. I've found something crucial, she announced during a high-level briefing. The Gorthok have a very specific view of honor in combat. They believe that retreat is the ultimate shame. Once they commit to a battle, they will fight to the death rather than withdraw. How does that help us? Admiral Stone asked. It means we can use their pride against them, Carol explained. If we can lure them into unfavorable battles, they won't retreat even when they should. We can turn their greatest strength into a weakness. Danny, who had been quiet during most of the strategic discussions, finally spoke up. There's something else we need to consider. The Gorthok aren't just military conquerors. This is a religious crusade for them. They believe they're destined to rule the galaxy. That makes them even more dangerous, but it also makes them more predictable. Religious fanatics don't compromise, Admiral Stone said grimly. No, they don't, Danny agreed. Which means this: war will only end when one side is completely defeated. There won't be any negotiations or peace treaties. It's going to be victory or total destruction. The room was silent as everyone absorbed this reality. Humanity was about to enter its first interstellar war, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Not just for humans, but for every peaceful civilization in the galaxy. Admiral Stone stood up and looked around the room at Earth's best military minds. Admiral Patricia Stone looked out at the massive fleet gathering around Earth and felt both pride and fear. In just 6 months, humanity had built the largest military force in its history. Ships from every human colony had come together for one purpose: to save the Veltar Collective from destruction. The shipyards around Earth, Mars, and Jupiter worked day and night. The sound of construction never stopped. Sparks flew from welding torches as workers built new ships and upgraded old ones. The Veltar had shared their advanced manufacturing technology, allowing humans to build ships faster than ever before. Captain Nick Thompson walked through the main assembly bay of the orbital shipyard above Earth. Around him, workers were installing new weapon systems on human ships. These weren't just human weapons anymore. They were something new, something that combined the best of both civilizations. "The energy coupling is stable," reported engineer Sam Carter as she checked the new weapon systems. "The Veltar power cells are working perfectly with our targeting computers." Nick nodded with satisfaction. The hybrid technology was better than either species could have created alone. Human ships were faster and more maneuverable. Veltar technology provided more powerful shields and energy weapons. Together, they created vessels that were superior to anything the Korthak had, but building ships was only part of the challenge. Humans had to learn how to fight in space on a scale they had never imagined. Commander Beth Parker stood in the training center on Luna, watching pilots practice combat maneuvers. The facility had been expanded 3 times to handle all the new recruits. Virtual reality simulators ran 24 hours a day, teaching pilots how to fight in 3-dimensional space battles. "Remember, space combat is nothing like atmospheric flight," Beth called out to a group of new pilots. "There's no up or down. Your enemy can come from any direction. You have to think in 3 dimensions all the time." The pilots were learning quickly. Humans had been flying combat aircraft for over a century. The basic principles of air combat translated well to space, but everything was more complex when gravity wasn't a factor. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster worked with the strategic planning team to develop new tactics for the combined fleet. The humans had studied every piece of intelligence about Korthak fighting methods. Now they were creating battle plans that would use those weaknesses against them. "The Korthak always attack in straight lines," Amy explained to a room full of ship commanders. "They spread out their fleet and advance slowly, trying to overwhelm their enemies with firepower. But that formation has a major weakness." She activated a holographic display showing both fleets in space. The Korthak ships were arranged in a simple line. The human and Veltar ships were grouped in smaller, more flexible formations. "If we can break their line at one point, we can roll up their entire formation. They're not trained to respond to that kind of attack." Captain Lisa Wright raised her hand. "What about their command structure? Intelligence says everything flows from their war supreme." "That's another weakness we can exploit," Amy replied. "If we can disrupt their communications or eliminate their leadership, their entire fleet will lose coordination." The training was intense, but humans were adapting quickly. Every day, more pilots completed their certification. Every week, more ships joined the growing Armada. General Chris Martinez was working on a different kind of preparation. Throughout Korthak-controlled space, conquered species were beginning to organize resistance movements. Human military advisors were secretly helping these groups prepare for the coming war. "The Kalthari on Betelgeuse 7 are ready to sabotage their orbital defenses," reported Major Janet Clark, who had just returned from a covert mission. "The Moranti survivors on Haven Station can disable the Korthak supply depot when we give the signal." Chris studied the star maps showing Korthak territory. Red dots marked resistance cells that were ready to strike. When the main battle began, these groups would attack Korthak supply lines and communications networks. "What about the slave workers in the asteroid mines?" Chris asked. "They're the most motivated," Janet replied. "The Korthak have been brutal to them. When we attack, they'll rise up and seize the mining stations. That will cut off a major source of raw materials for the Korthak war machine." The resistance networks were crucial to human strategy. The Korthak had spread their forces across dozens of star systems. They couldn't be everywhere at once. When the uprising began, they would have to choose between defending their conquests and attacking the human fleet. Meanwhile, the diplomatic aspects of the war were being handled by people like Ambassador John Davis. He was working with species throughout the galaxy, trying to build a coalition against Korthak expansion. "The Arcturus Republic has agreed to provide medical supplies and refugee support," John reported during a meeting with Admiral Stone. "They won't fight directly, but they'll help with the humanitarian crisis." "What about the Centauri Federation?" Admiral Stone asked. "They're still neutral, but they're worried about Korthak expansion toward their territory. If we can show that we're winning, they might join us." Building alliances was slow work, but it was important. The galaxy had been peaceful for so long that most species didn't know how to respond to the Korthak threat. If humans could prove that the Korthak could be defeated, other civilizations might find the courage to resist. The most important work was being done by scientists and engineers who were combining human and Veltar technology. Dr. Robert Kim led the research team that was developing new weapons and defenses. The breakthrough came when we realized that Veltar energy manipulation could enhance our kinetic weapons, Robert explained to Admiral Stone during a demonstration. Watch this. He fired a test projectile at a target made of the same material as Korthak's ship armor. The projectile was wrapped in a Veltar energy field that allowed it to penetrate much deeper than a normal round. Our missiles and railgun projectiles are now 50% more effective against Korthak armor, Robert continued. And the Veltar shield technology can absorb twice as much energy as our old defensive systems. But the most impressive development was the new class of hybrid warships. The UES Guardian was the first of these vessels, combining human engineering with Veltar technology. Captain Maria Santos had been chosen to command this revolutionary ship. The Guardian is faster than any human ship we've ever built, Maria reported to Admiral Stone. But it also has more firepower than a traditional Veltar vessel. It's the best of both worlds. The Guardian's first test flight had been spectacular. The ship could accelerate faster than any Korthak vessel, turn more quickly, and hit harder than anything in their fleet. If the humans could build enough ships like this, they would have a real advantage in the coming war. As the months passed, the human armada continued to grow. 3,000 ships of various sizes had been assembled. Battlecruisers, destroyers, fighters, support vessels, and the new hybrid ships all trained together in the space around Earth. The Veltar had contributed their own ships to the fleet. While their vessels weren't built for combat, they had been upgraded with human weapons and defensive systems. Veltar crews trained alongside human officers, learning the harsh realities of warfare. Captain Alex Rodriguez had returned from several diplomatic missions to Veltar space. He brought news that was both encouraging and worrying. The Veltar are doing everything they can to help, he reported to Admiral Stone. They've converted their entire industrial capacity to military production, but their intelligence sources say the Korthak are preparing something big. How big? Admiral Stone asked. A fleet of over 1,000 ships. They're calling it the Final Conquest. War Supreme Korthak believes that if he can destroy the Veltar quickly, it will discourage any other species from resisting him. This was the news Admiral Stone had been dreading. The Korthak were preparing for their largest military operation ever. If they succeeded, they would control a huge section of the galaxy. If they failed, their entire empire might collapse. When will they attack? She asked. Our best estimate is 3 months, Alex replied. Maybe 4 if we're lucky. Admiral Stone looked out at the fleet gathering around Earth. 3,000 ships seemed like a lot, but the Korthak would have almost as many. The coming battle would be the largest space combat in galactic history. Start issuing final deployment orders, she told her staff. It's time to move the fleet to Veltar space. Operation Deathworld begins now. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Ships were loaded with supplies and ammunition. Final training exercises were conducted. Crews said goodbye to their families, knowing they might never return to Earth. The departure of the fleet was unlike anything humans had ever seen. 3,000 ships leaving Earth orbit at the same time created a stream of light that could be seen from the planet's surface. Children watched from windows as humanity's greatest military force headed toward the stars. Admiral Stone stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UES Liberation, as the fleet entered faster-than-light travel. Behind them, Earth grew smaller and finally disappeared. Ahead lay the unknown, and the greatest challenge humanity had ever faced. All ships report. Ready for combat, came the voice of Admiral Rodriguez over the communications system. Admiral Alex Rodriguez watched the massive Korthak fleet approach through the view screen of his flagship. The enemy had finally arrived at the Veltar homeworld system, just as intelligence had predicted. Over 800 dark ships moved through space like a plague of locusts, ready to destroy everything in their path. All ships, this is Admiral Rodriguez. He spoke into his communicator. Operation Deathworld is now active. Remember your training and trust your crews. Today we show the galaxy that bullies can be beaten. The human Veltar fleet was spread across 7 different positions around the star system. Unlike the Korthak, who advanced in one massive formation, the Allied forces used small, flexible groups that could move quickly and strike from multiple directions. Captain Lisa Wright commanded the UES Falcon, leading a squadron of fast attack ships toward the edge of the Korthak formation. Her mission was to test their defenses and draw them away from the main battle. Remember, we're not trying to win this fight, she told her pilots. We're trying to make them angry enough to chase us. Hit them hard, then run. The Falcon and 12 other ships accelerated toward the Korthak fleet. Their new hybrid weapons charged up, combining human targeting systems with Veltar energy technology. When they fired, the results were spectacular. Beams of pure energy lanced out across space, striking the nearest Korthak ships. The alien vessels shuddered under the impact, their thick armor glowing red-hot where the weapons hit. 3 enemy ships exploded immediately, their crude technology unable to handle the damage. Direct hits on multiple targets, reported Lieutenant Tim Brooks from the weapons station. The new energy weapons are working perfectly. But the attack had the desired effect. The Korthak fleet began to turn toward the human ships, abandoning their careful formation to pursue what they saw as easy prey. They're taking the bait, Lisa observed with satisfaction. All ships, execute withdrawal, pattern alpha, make them chase us. The human ships turned and fled, but not too quickly. They wanted the Korthak to follow, to break up their formation and spread out across the system. As the enemy gave chase, other human squadrons struck from different directions. On the opposite side of the system, Captain Maria Santos led the U.S. Guardian and the other hybrid battleships in a direct assault on the Korthak command vessel. The enemy flagship was enormous, easily the size of 3 human ships, but it was also slow and clumsy. Target their communication arrays first, Maria ordered. If we can cut off their ability to coordinate, the rest of their fleet will be fighting blind. The Guardian's weapons were the most advanced in the human fleet. When they fired, the energy beams cut through Korthak armor like a knife through paper. The enemy flagship's communication towers exploded in brilliant flashes of light, but the Korthak weren't helpless. Return fire from dozens of enemy ships hammered against the Guardian's shields. The Veltar energy barriers held, but they were being pushed to their limits. Shield strength down to 60%, reported Engineer Sam Carter. We can't take much more of this punishment. Then we don't give them the chance, Maria replied. All ships, focus fire on the command ships' engines. If we can disable them, they'll be sitting ducks. Meanwhile, throughout Korthak-controlled space, the resistance networks were springing into action. On mining stations, slave workers overpowered their guards and seized control of vital facilities. On supply depots, saboteurs destroyed warehouses, full of weapons and ammunition. Major Janet Clark coordinated the uprising from a hidden base on the edge of Korthak space. Reports flooded in from dozens of star systems as conquered species rose up against their oppressors. The Moranti have taken the fuel depot at Rigel Station, she reported to Admiral Stone, who was monitoring the battle from the command ship, UES Liberation. The Kalthari have disabled the shipyard at Vega Prime. Korthak reinforcements are being delayed all across their territory. This was exactly what the humans had planned. The Korthak couldn't fight the main battle and suppress rebellions at the same time. They had to choose between defending their conquests and pressing their attack on the Veltar homeworld. Back in the main battle, the tide was beginning to turn. The Korthak fleet had been split into smaller groups chasing human squadrons across the system. Their coordination was breaking down without proper communication from their command ship. Captain Nick Thompson led a group of destroyers in a flanking attack on one of these scattered Korthak formations. The enemy ships were so focused on chasing other human vessels that they didn't notice the threat approaching from their blind side. Fire when ready, Nick ordered. Missiles and energy beams struck the Korthak ships from an unexpected direction. The enemy formation, caught completely off guard, lost 6 ships in the first volley. The survivors tried to turn and fight, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. "This is too easy," observed Lieutenant Dan Phillips. "They really don't know how to adapt when their plans go wrong." But the most important part of the battle was happening on the Korthak command ship itself. Captain John Davis led a team of Marines in a boarding action that would determine the outcome of the entire war. The UES Striker had managed to dock with the enemy flagship despite heavy defensive fire. Now Davis and 30 Marines were fighting, their way through corridors filled with Korthak warriors. The enemy soldiers were large and powerful, but they fought like individuals rather than as a team. Human Marines, trained to work together and adapt to changing situations, proved superior in the confined spaces of the ship. "Push forward to the bridge," Davis ordered, as his team advanced through the ship. "Every second we delay gives them more time to re-establish communication with their fleet." The Marines fought with weapons that combined human engineering and Veltar technology. Their armor was lighter but more effective than Korthak gear. Their weapons fired faster and hit harder. Most importantly, they fought with the tactical flexibility that came from being raised on a death world. When they reached the bridge of the Korthak flagship, they found War Supreme Gorthak himself directing the battle. The Korthak leader was enormous, covered in ceremonial armor decorated with the symbols of his conquests. When he saw the humans enter his bridge, he roared with rage. "Weak creatures from a pathetic world dare to challenge the Korthak dominion," he bellowed. "I will crush you with my bare hands." Gorthak charged at the humans, but Captain Davis was ready for him. The Marine captain had fought in conflicts across human space and knew how to handle opponents who relied on brute force, rather than skill. When the War Supreme swung his massive weapon, Davis ducked and struck back with precision. The Korthak leader was strong, but he was also predictable. After a brief but intense fight, Gorthak fell, defeated by a human who was half his size but twice as smart. "Korthak command ship secured," Davis reported to Admiral Rodriguez. "Enemy leader captured." The effect on the Korthak fleet was immediate and dramatic. Without their War Supreme to give orders, the various clan leaders began fighting among themselves. Some wanted to continue the attack. Others wanted to retreat and regroup. The unified Korthak dominion split apart in a matter of minutes. Admiral Rodriguez seized the opportunity. "All ships press the attack. Don't give them time to reorganize." The human Veltar fleet struck like lightning against the confused and divided enemy. Korthak ships that had seemed so powerful at the beginning of the battle were now easy targets. Their rigid command structure, which had been their strength when conquering peaceful civilizations, became their weakness when facing adaptable opponents. Within 6 hours, the battle was over. Most of the Korthak fleet had been destroyed or captured. The survivors fled in all directions, no longer a unified fighting force, but scattered groups of desperate warriors. The victory celebration was brief. Admiral Stone knew that defeating the main Korthak fleet was only the beginning. The empire they had built still controlled dozens of star systems and billions of enslaved beings. "Signal all resistance cells," she ordered. "Phase 2 of Operation Deathworld begins now. It's time to liberate every world the Korthak have conquered." Over the following months, human-led liberation forces moved through Korthak space like a cleansing wave. The enemy's rigid military structure, designed for conquest but not defense, collapsed rapidly when faced with coordinated attacks from multiple directions. Species that had been enslaved for decades were freed. Planets that had been strip-mined were restored using Veltar technology. The galaxy began to heal from the wounds the Korthak had inflicted, but the most important change was in how the galaxy viewed itself. News of the human victory spread to every inhabited world. For the first time in galactic history, a peaceful alliance had defeated a major military empire through superior tactics and technology. 17 different species petitioned to join what became known as the Galactic Defense Alliance. Earth became the military headquarters for this new organization, with humans serving as the primary peacekeeping force for their region of space. Admiral Jake Martinez, promoted from his original position at the Neptune Research Station, stood on the bridge of the new flagship UES Guardian as it patrolled the border between Alliance space and unexplored regions. The ship represented everything humanity had learned about combining their own abilities with those of their alien allies.